But I'm just telling you that if you're going to be really good and great, you got to put in the time.
The NFL has always been a battlefield, and at the center of it stood Troy Aikman, the fearless quarterback who carried the Dallas Cowboys through their dynasty years. Cool under pressure and deadly accurate with the ball, Aikman built a reputation as one of the toughest leaders the game has ever seen. But for every moment of glory, there were clashes that cut deep. Enemies who hit harder, talked louder, and left scars that never fully healed. These weren't just games. They were wars of pride and survival. And for Aikman, some of those rivalries would be impossible to forget. These rivalries weren't just regular games. They decided who ruled the NFC in the 90s. Every time Aikman dropped back, he wasn't only chasing wins, he was fighting for his body, his pride, and the Cowboys' place in history. Darrell Green, Washington Redskins. When you talk about Troy Aikman's enemies, most people picture the bruising pass rushers who tried to tear him apart in the pocket. But one of his biggest headaches came from the opposite side of the field, a cornerback who never seemed to slow down. That man was Darrell Green of the Washington Redskins, the definition of consistency and speed in the NFL. Green wasn't the type of enemy who left Aikman's ribs sore after a hit. Instead, he left him frustrated. Every time Aikman lined up against Washington, he knew Green was out there, waiting to erase his favorite targets. And that was no small task, because Aikman had Michael Irvin, a Hall of Fame wide receiver who thrived on big plays. But Green had a way of ruining that connection, using his legendary quickness to blanket Irvin and shut down passing lanes. The conflict came from repetition. In the NFC East of the 1990s, the Cowboys and Redskins clashed twice a year, every year. It wasn't a casual rivalry. It was war for control of the division. And while Dallas had the offensive firepower, Washington had Darrell Green, the one player Aikman could never completely solve. What made it worse was Green's reputation as the fastest man in football. Even into his late 30s, he could run stride for stride with receivers 10 years younger. Aikman knew that one mistake, a throw just a second late or a little too soft, and Green would pounce. More than once, Green snatched away an interception that killed Dallas's momentum. Each time it felt less like a lucky break and more like a man who had studied Aikman's habits and learned exactly when to strike. There's no story of Green trash-talking or trying to injure Aikman. That wasn't his style. But sometimes, respect makes the rivalry sting even more. Aikman admired Green's talent. Who didn't? He was a 7-time Pro Bowler and eventually a Hall of Famer. But admiration doesn't make the games easier. For Aikman, it was maddening to know that even his sharpest reads and best throws weren't guaranteed against a cornerback who seemed ageless. The impact of this rivalry wasn't about a single hit or one highlight reel moment. It was about the constant reminder that greatness recognizes greatness. Aikman had to fight for every inch against Darrell Green, and he couldn't rely on his usual weapons the way he could against other teams. That pressure forced him to elevate his game, to be sharper, faster, and more disciplined. In the end, Darrell Green wasn't the kind of enemy Aikman hated with anger. He was the enemy Aikman could never forget because of the frustration he caused. He represented the chess match side of football, where brains and instincts mattered as much as brute strength. And for Troy Aikman, that quiet but relentless challenge was just as unforgettable as any bone-crushing hit he ever took. But if Darrell Green frustrated Aikman with pure speed, the next enemy made him fear for his survival, the most terrifying defender in NFL history. Lawrence Taylor, New York Giants. Before Troy Aikman became the cool, unshakable leader of the Dallas Cowboys, he had to survive the early years. And nothing tested him more than facing Lawrence Taylor of the New York Giants. LT wasn't just a great defender, he was a force of nature, the kind of player who could take over a game by himself. For a young quarterback trying to find his footing, going up against Taylor was like stepping into a storm with no umbrella. The setup was brutal. Aikman entered the NFL in 1989, thrown straight into the fire as the Cowboys tried to rebuild. The Giants, on the other hand, had LT, a defender who terrified even the most experienced quarterbacks. Every snap, Aikman had to wonder, where is 56 coming from this time? Taylor could blitz off the edge, drop back into coverage, or crash right through the middle. There was no safe place on the field. The specific conflict wasn't about words or trash talk. It was about survival. Taylor thrived on rattling young quarterbacks, and Aikman, a rookie on a struggling Dallas team, became an easy target. In their first meetings, LT delivered punishing hits that reminded Aikman just how different the NFL was from college ball. For fans, it looked like a superstar defender doing his job. For Aikman, it felt like being hunted. There are countless stories of quarterbacks admitting LT got inside their heads. Aikman wasn't the type to complain, but he understood quickly that Taylor wasn't just playing defense. He was setting a tone. He wanted opponents to fear him before the ball was even snapped. And with Aikman, he succeeded. Every game against New York became a test of courage as much as talent. What makes this rivalry interesting is the mix of fear and respect. Aikman hated the way Taylor could change a game with one violent play, but he also knew he was witnessing something rare. LT wasn't just another linebacker, he redefined the position. Facing him, as painful as it was, became a kind of twisted honor. If you could take a hit from Lawrence Taylor and get back up, you belonged in the NFL. The impact lasted beyond those early games. Taylor gave Aikman a harsh introduction to the league, but it shaped him into the quarterback who would later win 3 Super Bowls. Surviving LT taught him resilience. It taught him how to handle pressure when everything around him was collapsing. For Aikman, Lawrence Taylor was never a friendly face across the line of scrimmage. He was the nightmare who made his rookie years a trial by fire. But that nightmare also sharpened him, and in time, Aikman could look back with respect, even if, in the moment, it felt like facing a predator every time he took the field. Surviving Lawrence Taylor was a test of courage, but Aikman's next rival wasn't just about intimidation. He was a force of nature who could single-handedly ruin playoff dreams. By the way, if you're enjoying these rivalries, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring more stories of NFL legends and the battles that defined their careers. And tell me in the comments, if you were Aikman, who would you least want to face? Darrell Green's speed or Lawrence Taylor's fury? Reggie White, Green Bay Packers. If there was one man who could turn Troy Aikman's calm confidence into frustration, it was Reggie White, the legendary pass rusher of the Green Bay Packers. Known as the Minister of Defense, White wasn't just strong, he was unstoppable. For Aikman, every time Dallas lined up against Green Bay in the mid-1990s, he knew White was waiting to wreck the game plan. The Cowboys and the Packers met when the stakes were highest. Playoffs, NFC showdowns. Games where one mistake could end a season. And in those moments, Reggie White seemed to come alive. He wasn't the type of player you could scheme around. Double teams didn't matter. Chip blocks didn't slow him down. He had the power to bulldoze through linemen and the quickness to slide past them before Aikman could even finish his drop. The conflict was simple. Aikman needed time in the pocket to hit his stars: Irvin, Harper, Novacek. Reggie White made sure that time never existed. More than once, Aikman found himself on the turf, staring up at the sky, with White standing over him. Those hits weren't just sacks, they were statements. White was saying, "This is my field, and you're not leaving it unscathed." There's one moment that stands out in the rivalry, the 1995 NFC Championship build-up. Dallas had already knocked Green Bay out of the playoffs 2 years in a row, and Reggie took it personally. He swore the Packers wouldn't be pushed around again. Even though Dallas pulled out victories, Aikman knew the price. Each win came with bruises, aches, and the constant memory of White's massive frame crashing down on him. Unlike some enemies, Reggie didn't need trash talk. His presence was enough. He was respected across the league, even by the men he punished, and that made it worse for Aikman. There was no personal feud to hide behind, just the knowledge that one of the greatest defenders in NFL history was locked on him like prey. The impact of facing Reggie White went beyond the bruises. He symbolized the kind of challenge that defined Aikman's career. Every time the Cowboys conquered Green Bay, it meant Aikman had survived one of the most relentless defenders to ever play. And in the few moments when White broke through, it reminded Aikman just how fragile control could be in a playoff war. For Troy Aikman, Reggie White wasn't just another name on the scouting report. He was the storm that never went away, the wall of strength that made every throw a gamble. And while Aikman earned respect by beating the Packers in January, he also carried the memory of every crushing hit delivered by a man who seemed larger than life. Reggie White was the storm Aikman could never fully escape. Yet the next rival came with a twist, a man who once tried to crush Aikman but would later become his teammate. Charles Haley, San Francisco 49ers, before Cowboys. Before Charles Haley became one of Troy Aikman's most important teammates on the Dallas Cowboys dynasty, he was one of Aikman's worst nightmares. In the early 1990s, when Aikman was still carving out his place in the NFL, Haley was lining up on the other side for the San Francisco 49ers, and he was a problem Aikman couldn't ignore. Haley wasn't just any pass rusher. He was unpredictable, explosive, and mean in the way only the best defenders are. He played with a kind of edge that made every snap dangerous. When Dallas and San Francisco met, Aikman knew he had only seconds before Haley came crashing through his protection. Unlike some defenders who played within the lines, Haley thrived on making quarterbacks uncomfortable, physically and mentally. The conflict grew because of the stage. Dallas and San Francisco weren't battling for regular season pride. They were fighting for NFC dominance, year after year. If Aikman wanted a Super Bowl, he had to go through the 49ers, and standing in his way was Haley, hungry to make life miserable for him. Aikman wasn't just facing a great defender, he was dealing with a man who seemed built for chaos. Haley's speed off the edge forced Aikman into rushed throws, bad reads, and hits that lingered long after the game was over. There are stories of Haley's intensity that sound almost unbelievable. Teammates from San Francisco said he was a ticking time bomb, flipping between unstoppable focus and unpredictable rage. For Aikman, that made every meeting even more dramatic. You couldn't study Haley's tendencies on film the same way you could with others. He was too wild, too aggressive, too determined to wreck whatever game plan the Cowboys had. And yet, the twist in this rivalry is what makes it unforgettable. In 1992, the Cowboys pulled off a stunning trade, bringing Haley to Dallas. Suddenly, the man who had been chasing Aikman for years was now protecting his legacy. The same intensity that had once terrified Aikman was now aimed at their opponents, and it changed everything. With Haley on the defensive line, the Cowboys' dynasty truly came to life, and Aikman reaped the benefits of no longer having to face him. The reflection here is powerful. Haley showed Aikman what it felt like to be hunted, but he also proved what could happen when that same fire was on your side. Before the trade, Haley represented San Francisco's grip on the NFC. After it, he became one of the keys to Dallas's rise. For Aikman, that journey from enemy to teammate was unforgettable. In the end, Charles Haley was more than just another rival. He was a reminder that in the NFL, lines can shift, and yesterday's nightmare can become today's savior. But Aikman never forgot the years when Haley wore red and gold, coming after him with everything he had, determined to keep the Cowboys in check. Haley taught Aikman what it felt like to be hunted before switching sides to build a dynasty. But his next rival wasn't chasing him from the line. He was staring at him from across the field. Quick break. I want to hear from you. Which rivalry do you think meant more to Aikman's legacy? Fighting off the 49ers' defense or surviving the Eagles' all-out assaults? Drop your answer below. I'll be checking the comments. Steve Young, San Francisco 49ers for Troy Aikman. No rival burned brighter than Steve Young. This wasn't about one defender chasing him down or one corner stealing his passes. This was quarterback versus quarterback, leader versus leader, with the entire NFC hanging in the balance. In the early to mid-1990s, the road to the Super Bowl almost always ran through either Dallas or San Francisco, and that made every Aikman-Young clash feel like a heavyweight fight. Young wasn't just a talented passer, he was the complete opposite of Aikman in style. Where Aikman stayed calm in the pocket, Young was explosive, using his legs to extend plays and drive defenses crazy. That contrast made their rivalry so gripping. Whenever they faced off, it wasn't just about which team had more talent. It was about which quarterback could impose his will when the game mattered most. The conflict between the two was born in the playoffs. In the 1992 and 1993 NFC Championships, Aikman and the Cowboys knocked off Young's 49ers, slamming the door on his chance to escape Joe Montana's shadow. Dallas dominated, and Aikman came out looking like the face of a dynasty, while Young carried the sting of back-to-back heartbreaks. For Aikman, those victories were career-defining. For Young, they were humiliating setbacks. And both men knew they'd see each other again. By 1994, the roles shifted. San Francisco reloaded, and Young finally got his revenge. In the NFC Championship that year, he tore through Dallas's defense, and the 49ers went on to win the Super Bowl. For Aikman, it was a bitter pill. He had tasted the dominance of the rivalry from the top, and now he was on the other side, watching his greatest challenger rise. What made this rivalry special was the drama it carried. These weren't just big games, they were defining moments for the NFL in the 1990s. Fans tuned in, knowing it would be war. One side had Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin. The other had Young, Jerry Rice, and Ricky Watters. It wasn't just two teams playing football. It was dynasties colliding and quarterbacks taking the weight of history on their shoulders. The reflection is clear. Steve Young wasn't just another opponent for Aikman. He was the man who forced him to prove, year after year, that Dallas truly was the team of the decade. Their clashes showed that even the calmest leader could be tested, and even the most talented quarterback could be denied. For Aikman, beating Young meant legacy. Losing to him meant watching someone else take the crown. And that's why Steve Young became unforgettable. He wasn't just a rival. He was the mirror that reflected Aikman's greatness and the obstacle that made every triumph taste even sweeter. Beating Steve Young meant legacy. Losing to him meant heartbreak. But even that rivalry wasn't as personal as the enemy who seemed determined not just to beat Aikman, but to break him. Buddy Ryan's Eagles defense. Philadelphia Eagles. If there was one enemy that truly felt personal for Troy Aikman, it was Buddy Ryan's Philadelphia Eagles defense. Unlike other rivals who played hard within the game, the Eagles under Ryan seemed to cross a line. Their goal wasn't just to beat Aikman, it was to break him. For a young quarterback trying to survive in the NFC East, no opponent left a darker shadow. The setup was brutal. The Cowboys and Eagles already hated each other, but Ryan's defenses took that rivalry to another level. They were stacked with vicious talent: Reggie White, Jerome Brown, Clyde Simmons, Seth Joyner. It wasn't just one star Aikman had to worry about. It was wave after wave of defenders coming straight for him. And they weren't satisfied with sacks. They wanted to punish him, to make him pay for every snap he took. The conflict became clear in 1989, Aikman's rookie year. On Thanksgiving, Dallas hosted Philadelphia in what became one of the most infamous games of his career. The Eagles' defense treated Aikman like a tackling dummy, hitting him over and over. The Cowboys were a rebuilding team, and Ryan's defense smelled blood. By the end of the game, Aikman was battered, humiliated, and left with the kind of pain that doesn't fade quickly. That beating became part of what fans still call the Bounty Bowl era, a time when there were whispers that Ryan placed rewards on injuring opponents. Whether true or not, the way the Eagles went after Aikman made it feel believable. What separated this rivalry from others was the tone. With Darryl Green, it was about skill. With Lawrence Taylor, it was about intimidation. With Reggie White, it was about power. But with Buddy Ryan's Eagles, it felt personal. Aikman wasn't just a quarterback to them. He was the face of a hated rival franchise, and they seemed determined to knock him out of the game by any means necessary. The impact of those years shaped Aikman's toughness. Every trip to Philadelphia meant bracing for a beating. The Vet, the Eagles' home stadium, had a reputation as a place where visiting players left bruised and broken. And Aikman knew all too well what that felt like. He hated the Eagles, not just because they were tough to beat, but because every time he faced them, his health was at risk. And yet, in a strange way, those painful battles added to his legacy. Surviving Buddy Ryan's defense made his later dominance even sweeter. Beating the Eagles wasn't just another win. It was revenge, proof that they couldn't break him no matter how many times they tried. For Aikman, no enemy was more personal, more brutal, or more unforgettable than Buddy Ryan's Eagles. They didn't just test his talent, they tested his will to keep getting back up. And every time he did, it cemented the toughness that defined his career. These rivalries weren't just football games. They were battles that shaped Troy Aikman's career. From Darryl Green's speed to Lawrence Taylor's fury, Reggie White's power, and the wars with the 49ers, all the way to Buddy Ryan's brutal Eagles, each enemy pushed him to the limit. Together, they made his wins sweeter and his legacy unforgettable. Who do you think was Aikman's fiercest rival? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss more legendary NFL stories.